Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Shifting Power in Learning and Evaluation webinar. Just going to wait for people to trickle in a little bit, and then we'll start. So as people are coming in, I just want to let you all know that we have interpretation in Spanish and English available. If you go to the bottom of your screens, roughly in the middle, you should see a button with a globe on it that says interpretation. And if you click on that, it should allow you to select English or Spanish, which will switch you to an audio channel where you can hear our interpreter, Maria Chimino, speaking. Dani, would you mind saying that in Spanish?
Con mucho gusto, Sam. Para las personas que se están uniendo, bienvenidas. Tenemos la función de interpretación disponible en este webinario. Tienen que hacer clic en un globito que van a encontrar abajo en la barra de menú y ahí pueden escoger el canal para escuchar ya sea en inglés o la interpretación gracias a nuestra interpretadora María Chimino en español.
Thanks, Dani. Okay, hi everyone who's coming in. Welcome to the Shifting Power in Learning and Evaluation webinar. Now that we have a few more people, I'm just going to repeat the message about interpretation. We have interpretation in Spanish and English available. So there's a button at the bottom of the screen that says interpretation and has a symbol of a globe on it. And you can click on that and select the English or Spanish channels. It is a bilingual panel, so we're going to have speakers speaking in both English and Spanish. So if you want to hear all in English, please select the button as well.
Solo repitiendo lo que dijo Sam, tenemos la función de interpretación disponible para las personas que están entrando. Es un globito que pueden encontrar en la barra de herramientas de su programa de Zoom y ahí pueden escoger si quieren quedarse en el canal de inglés o en el canal de español. Creo que si se quedan en el canal bilingüe van a poder escuchar tanto inglés como español para las personas que quieran escuchar así.
Okay, let's get started. So thank you everyone for joining us. I'm very excited to welcome you to the webinar today. So today we are going to be exploring a collaboration between Global Fund for Children as well as community-based organizations on a learning review for a 4-year initiative that work to advance the rights of adolescent girls in Central America. So just for reference, the initiative is called the Empowering Adolescent Girls in Central America Initiative. We'll refer to that a couple times, and or the ENA initiative for short. And one last note, a learning review is similar to an evaluation, and our panelists will get more into the details of what that is once we dive in. So for a few people who just joined, we have interpretation available. You can go to the bottom of the screen and there's a button that says interpretation with a globe on it. And you can select between the English and Spanish channels to hear from our amazing interpreter, Maria Chimino. So just repeating that. Okay, so some of the themes we're going to cover today are the learning review and the motivation behind taking this collaborative approach, how it was developed, as well as the experience of our GFC staff and partner organizations who conducted independent research projects in support of the learning review. This is a Zoom webinar, and so there's a few technical points I want to cover. There is a chat, and if you have any questions for our panelists during the presentation, please just post them in there. At the end of the event, we will have a few minutes for a Q&A where I can pass on some of your questions to our panelists. If we don't get to your question, don't worry, we're going to follow up later this week with an email that will include a few more responses from our panelists to any questions we missed. So just for those who just arrived, there is interpretation available. Again, it's at the bottom of the screen. There's a globe button that says interpretation, and you can select that and then choose between English and Spanish channels. And we'll keep repeating that in the chat just to let people who join later know. So Danny, could you one last time just share that in Spanish, and then we'll begin?
Sure. Para las personas que se están recién uniendo, vamos a tener la función de interpretación de inglés a español y de español a inglés. Es un panel bilingüe, entonces vamos a estar hablando en inglés y en español. Pueden seleccionar el globito que van a encontrar en su barra de herramientas de Zoom para seleccionar ya sea el canal en inglés o el canal en español, si quieren escuchar en cualquiera de los dos idiomas.
Okay, thank you. And now, without further ado, I'm very excited to introduce to you our 4 panelists. So from the organization CREA in Nicaragua, we have Rosa Maria Torres Ruiz. Rosa started at CREA as an assistant for youth empowerment, and in 2019, she took up the role of facilitator of CREA's community health program. And from Asociación AMA, we have Jacqueline Fernanda Caceres Orrego. Jacqueline is a youth leader from Northern Guatemala, and in 2021, Jacqueline coordinated, led, and wrote Asociación AMA's case study as part of the Empowering Adolescent Girls Initiative and the learning review that we're going to be talking about today. And we also have 2 panelists joining us from GFC today. We have Daniela Martinez as the program manager for the Americas team at Global Fund for Children. Daniela works with partners in Central and South America to strengthen their capacity and network building. And we have Lisa Yanovich, who's the director of our learning and evaluation team. Lisa supports GFC in designing and implementing its learning, evaluation, and research practices, and aims to generate evidence that will translate into action. And finally, I will be moderating the conversation today. My name is Sam Phillips Corwin, and I am the Learning and Evaluation Officer at Global Fund for Children. So with that, let's get started and hear a little bit from our panelists. Danny, could you start us off, please, by telling us about the Empowering Adolescent Girls Initiative, including what types of organizations were a part of it and why GFC was interested in connecting them in the first place?
Sure, Sam, happy to. The Empowering Adolescent Girls Initiative, or ENA for its acronym in Spanish for Empoderando a Niñas Adolescentes, was a 4-year initiative supported by the Dubai Cares Foundation that aimed to strengthen 17 community organizations across Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. These 17 organizations employed different methods and approaches to empower adolescent girls and support them in advancing their rights and opportunities. Some of these included, extracurricular academic reinforcement programs, such as reading clubs, mobile community libraries, one-on-one tutoring. Others worked with trainings and workshops on youth leadership, sexual reproductive health for the prevention of early pregnancy, marriage, gender-based violence, the promotion of self-esteem and self-care, health and nutrition. Others did, for instance, fairs, festivals, theater performances, conferences, camps that used games, arts, and theater to reinforce in fun and dynamic ways important themes such as school attendance, basic human rights of children and youth, advocacy. Others provided direct psychosocial and physical care to adolescent girls who were survivors of different types of violence, including physical, sexual, emotional violence. And a lot of them we saw also worked with local institutions such as municipalities, school boards, community health providers, even religious groups to garner their support for girl-focused programming. This is just I could go on and on about what our amazing partners did. But basically our main objective for weaving these partners together into a cohort was for them to be able to learn from each other, share methodologies and other resources, and strengthen the work that they were doing to support and empower adolescent girls in the region. And one of the reasons for doing this is that, especially given the increasingly difficult economic and political conditions that our partners are operating in. So, we've seen a stream of laws in the region to hinder NGOs operating in their home countries. We've seen lack of funding and opportunities to focus on their own capacity and development and growth, and not to mention the pandemic, which has set us back tremendously in terms of human development indicators, etc. We wanted them to feel like they weren't working in isolation. And so by bringing them together in both in-person and virtual convenings, we would create spaces of trust so that they could exchange experiences, methodologies, ideas for working with children and adolescent girls, and thus promote cross-partner collaboration and learning as part of the ENA initiative.
Thank you, Dani. Okay, and Rosa, would you mind telling us a little bit about your organization, the work that you do, and what your experience participating in the ENA initiative was like?
Muy buenos días a todos. Bueno, como decía, mi nombre es Rosa, soy de Nicaragua y trabajo en la organización CREA. Esta organización, voy a compartir mi pantalla para poder mostrarles qué es lo que nosotros hacemos. Bueno, CREA es una organización sin fines de lucro que está ubicada en la parte sur de Nicaragua, en las comunidades rurales. CREA se enfoca en fortalecer la lectura y el aprendizaje, promoviendo oportunidades para el desarrollo de las niñas, adolescentes y mujeres de las diferentes comunidades. CREA cuenta con 3 iniciativas. La primera es biblioteca, podemos ver, tiene préstamos de libros para las diferentes edades, no solo para niños, sino para todas las personas que quieran llegar a prestar un libro, leer o hacer sus investigaciones. También tenemos el club de lectura con madre e hija, donde se van a diferentes comunidades a realizar club de lecturas con madre e hija. Tenemos la segunda iniciativa que es académico. Esta se encarga de hacer reforzamiento educativo, tanto a primaria y secundaria en los niños en las diferentes comunidades que tenemos nosotros. Y por último tenemos la iniciativa Empoderamiento Juvenil, donde tenemos un grupo de jóvenes, niños, niñas, adolescentes que participan y estos son encargados de nosotros. Lo que se lleva a cabo es orientación profesional, desarrollo de habilidades, educación, becas universitarias, desarrollo con el medio ambiente, salud sexual, educación en salud sexual y liderazgo con las niñas que están involucradas en todo este proceso.
Great, thank you, Rosa. Jackie, can you tell us a little bit about your organization and work and what your experience participating in the initiative was like?
Hola, ¿qué tal? Muy buenos días, bienvenidos a todos. Mi nombre es Jacqueline Cáceres. Soy voluntaria de Asociación AMA, una asociación sin ánimo de lucro que está acá en Guatemala, y para que conozcamos un poquito más del trabajo que realizamos, les voy a compartir en pantalla. Bueno, pues déjenme contarles que Asociación AMA es una asociación sin ánimo de lucro que promueve el desarrollo integral y los derechos de las niñas, adolescentes y mujeres jóvenes, fortaleciendo su empoderamiento, sus derechos de toda niña, adolescente y mujer joven. A través de capacidades, de educación e información, traslado de capacidades, participación democrática, desarrollo económico sostenible y a través del diálogo. Y pues en tal sentido, déjenme contarles que AMA trabaja con y para las niñas, adolescentes y mujeres jóvenes de Petén, de Guatemala, y que nosotros somos las principales actoras. ¿A qué me refiero que somos las principales actoras? Es porque nuestros puntos de vista son tomados en cuenta a la hora de la elaboración de proyectos y en la toma de decisiones. Acá, como podemos ver en la primera imagen, está el empoderamiento y liderazgo, donde vamos con diálogo igual, donde vamos con las niñas y adolescentes, promoviendo capacidades, diálogo, charlas educativas, y también fortalecemos nuestro trabajo con el deporte, como ven acá esta bonita imagen, y también y también por medio del medio ambiente y asistencia humanitaria. Y pues nuestra participación se refuerza aún más porque somos nosotros las que ejecutamos los programas y proyectos, y pues esto ha ayudado a la asociación a tener una respuesta efectiva en la problemática que son los embarazos tempranos y la violencia de género. Y pues déjenme contarles que es de suma importancia, igual que conozcan que Asociación AMA trabaja y fortalece por medio de radio comunitaria y por medio de sus redes sociales, ya que cada semanal tenemos un programa de radio dirigido a mujeres, jóvenes y niñas, bueno, a todos y todas, y los cuales transmitimos por nuestra radio y también por medio de la página de Facebook de Asociación AMA, lo cual ahí queda la información para que aquellos que no lo ven por medio de live, entonces ahí queda esta información para que ellos lo vean. También trabajamos por medio de incidencia política, y pues estos procesos se vieron fortalecidos aún más gracias al financiamiento que nos otorgó por medio del programa Empoderando Niñas Adolescentes del Fondo Global para la Niñez, ya que nos brindaron financiamiento para darle seguimiento a estas problemáticas y también fortalecer nuestra capacidad organizacional a través del desarrollo de nuestra política de salvaguarda, plan estratégico, plan de comunicación y plan de medios digitales. Y en fin, ha sido un cúmulo de beneficios que hemos recibido de parte de GFC y aún seguimos recibiendo.
Okay, thank you so much, Jackie and Rosa, for sharing about your amazing work. Let's move on now to talking a little bit about the learning review itself. Dani, could you start us off again by telling us about the learning review, how it came about, where the idea for partner-led research projects came from, and what you were seeking to accomplish by taking this approach?
Yes, GFC, through the learning review, wanted to learn about the impact, effectiveness, and sustainability of the initiative. And we also thought this could be a great opportunity to test the effectiveness of our own model of flexible core funding, capacity development support, and network building. Specifically, we wanted to explore our partners' experiences during the first 2.5, 3 years of the initiative, its direct impact on their organizational and programming capacities, and its indirect impact on the adolescent girls and communities that our partners serve. We used a mixed methods approach, which I think Lisa, as our M&E expert, will tell you a little bit more about. But basically, we used outcome harvesting, which is a methodology that basically looks to ask partners certain questions and basically an evaluation approach that's used to gather evidence of change and identify ways in which an initiative contributed to these changes. We also used key informant interviews. We had a theory of change workshop with our partners. We also analyzed, which you're well aware because you were part of the one who did all of that, analyzed quantitative and qualitative data from partner reports and other documents that we collected over the first 2.5, 3 years of the project. And the reason why we decided to involve partners in the research process was twofold. First, we wanted to support their own organizational capacity growth by letting them explore and dive deep into different research methods. And so for this reason, we gave partners small research grants that they could use to conduct their own research. And the second piece to the participatory learning review is that we wanted partners to feel empowered to contribute their own voice and their own experiences with the overall initiative to the learning process. So for us, it was really interesting to give them a space to really analyze and go deep into their own experiences and feel the liberty and the trust that we've been trying to instill in them for the past years of the initiative to really let us know in their own independent way what their experience was in the initiative, what pros and cons it brought to them, and how they felt that the initiative indirectly contributed to empowering the adolescent girls that they serve.
Thank you, Dani, for that explanation. Lisa, following up on that, How did the learning review accomplish these goals, and what specific steps did GFC take to incorporate partners and give them space to conduct that research independently? Finally, how did these research projects fit into the overall learning review?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. And thanks, Danny, for opening up the conversation on how we structured the learning review. I also want to add that the learning review that we conducted together with partners lasted almost a year, because from the time that it came as an idea to the time that we released the final report, through COVID lockdowns, through the inability to do much of this in person, it was really quite a creative approach and an experience for us. It also involved a whole team of people conducting activities, workshops, interviews, etc., doing analysis, writing different sections of the final report, which I believe Maria is going to drop into the chat for us. It's available both in English and Spanish. And there's also a blog that I wrote to introduce the report. And while several of the activities involved an external consultant, this was done when an unbiased perspective we felt was most necessary. So we actually deliberately chose not to conduct a traditional third-party evaluation for the entire learning review, because we wanted to make sure that, as Danny mentioned, partners had ownership of the process, their voice was heard, and this could really help guide what was being evaluated and how it was being assessed, and this could be guided by the partners. We also believe that learning should be, should focus less on assessment as the end goal and more on empowering and enabling local stakeholders to take charge of the process. So through this approach, not only did we have a chance to collectively evaluate the initiative, and when I say collectively, I mean together with the partners, but partners also had a chance to reflect on how their programs and how their work was impacting the participants and impacting the community. So we were very cognizant during the entire process of this learning review about, and through the entire process of the initiative itself, about attribution. We were very careful not to attribute our partners' success to our own. And if we did attribute it to our own success, there was always a little note about the fact that our impact on girls and the communities that our partners serve is indirect. And so we really wanted to make sure that even in the report, you will see that when we talk about the change at the community and the adolescent girl level, we always highlight that this is our partner's work, not ours, with our support, of course. So to maximize partners' involvement, we offered feedback sessions during the learning review's design and inception phase. We organized meetings to tell partners about our approach to the learning review, to encourage them to share their input, to sense check the research questions that we had developed, and to present them with possible activity options that we were going to carry out during this learning review. These sessions helped us frame the evaluation, helped us identify key activities for the data collection, and helped us to really have this constant communication channel open with our partners. And we took the feedback that we received and incorporated into the learning review. So the entire process of the learning review, when we designed it, it was very flexible and we adapted it along the way as much as we could. We also invited partners to evaluate GFC's approach, and we did this by organizing a theory of change workshop. During this workshop, we facilitated a conversation with partners to give them the opportunity to take a closer look at the GFC theory of change, to analyze it for accuracy, to look at the measurability of different elements of the theory of change, and also to look at the relevance of the initiative to the theory of change and to the broader context. This was an important step for us to get feedback on our theory of change and also its relevance to our partners' work, and to, again, build that relationship with our partners where feedback is constantly being collected and acted upon. Now, on partner-led research, which was a part of the question that you asked, Sam, partner on the independent research projects, Jackie and Rosa will tell us about this more in just a minute. But overall, 10 partners out of the 17 completed research projects, small research projects. Some of them conducted participatory action research, which is a method that prioritizes the knowledge and experience of communities while also incorporating some traditional research methods. They conducted participatory action research projects, and other partners conducted case studies. These research projects helped the partners and helped us explore the impact of their programming on adolescent girls and their communities, as well as what impact we saw from the being part of the initiative and from GFC's support. So we had a meeting where we pitched an idea to the partners. Some of them submitted short proposals, and we then gave them some choices for different methodologies, from which they selected the two that I talked about, the participatory action research and the case studies. Then the organizations designed the activities, designed their research with our support. And the research projects were meant to help answer one or two of the key research questions that we had developed and sense checked with the partners on their programming's impact on the girls. We offered guidance sessions along the way. We offered workshops. We offered funding to cover research costs. And their findings from these research projects complemented all of the other learning review activities that Danny had talked about. So the key informant interviews, the outcome harvesting, the theory of change workshop, the analysis, huge analysis of quantitative and qualitative data. And it helped us build an evidence base to answer the research questions of the learning review. So we will hear more on this from our partners in just a minute. And I will just wrap my response up by saying that throughout the learning review process, we saw opportunities to turn traditional evaluation activities into opportunities for capacity development. So, for example, when we conducted an outcome harvesting workshop to harvest outcomes, to understand that change and the impact of that change on the communities with partners, we thought, amongst ourselves, well, why not turn this workshop into a training for partners where we could help them learn how to conduct an outcome harvesting workshop themselves? Because as many of you know, being part of an activity as a participant is very different than conducting that activity. So then we put our heads together and we came up with a workshop that our lovely consultant conducted for partners who were interested, invited them to a training on designing, implementing, and analyzing data from an outcome harvesting workshop. So hopefully this is a tool that they can use at some point in their work with their communities or with their teams. At another point during the learning review process, when the GFC team was really deep in the analysis of qualitative data, because we had such an abundance of qualitative data of these amazing stories of change, we decided to do a workshop, a show and tell style workshop, where my team, the learning and evaluation team, literally we shared our screen and we showed partners how we engage in qualitative data analysis. So they joined this workshop and we demonstrated how to set up a qualitative data set. We walked the group through several approaches for coding qualitative data, and then we discussed strategies for presenting findings in a compelling way. So this was really a thoughtful, deliberate approach to not only conduct an evaluation or learning review. And we, by the way, we say learning review at GFC as opposed to evaluation because we really value the learning piece in that phrase. So as I mentioned, we really try to focus on the learning. And we used a lot of the opportunities to build our capacity and then also to share knowledge and to build partners' capacity and for them to build each other's capacity.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, that was a really great explanation of the context around the partners' research projects. So let's hear a little bit more from Rosa and Jackie about the actual case study and PAR that they conducted, Participatory Action Research Project. Rosa, could you start us off by telling us about the research project that CREA conducted and how the process went, including planning, execution, and analysis, and also a little bit about who from your organization was involved and how that worked?
Bueno, en el proceso que nosotros llevamos de investigación, el proceso de aprendizaje, nosotros decidimos tomar lo que era la iniciativa de empoderamiento juvenil, en especial el proyecto de salud comunitaria. Salud comunitaria es uno de los programas que tiene CREA, y esto es encargado de ir a los colegios que están en las comunidades rurales para dar charlas sobre diferentes temas a los jóvenes, niños, niñas y adolescentes que están. Son 9 escuelas a las que asistimos y se les da charlas sobre diferentes temas, por ejemplo, bullying, prevención de embarazo a temprana edad, métodos anticonceptivos, enfermedades de transmisión sexual, autoestima y otros diferentes. Entonces nosotros decidimos tomar como investigación este programa para ver qué estaba sucediendo, cómo estábamos trabajando, cuál era lo que nosotros estábamos llevando a cabo, si estábamos realmente teniendo algún impacto en estos jóvenes. Que nosotros involucramos a dos personas, lo que son el centro de salud de la comunidad de Salinas, donde ellos nos ayudaron a hacer lo que es todo el proceso. Estaba involucrada la enfermera del centro de salud, llevaba todas las estadísticas de las niñas embarazadas que hay en todas las comunidades, entonces las tomamos en cuenta a ella. También tomamos en cuenta lo que era a Marta Rosa de una asociación cercana que es colaboradora con CREA, se llama Casa de la Mujer, y ella estábamos involucrada, teníamos experiencia en estos procesos. Entonces decidimos buscar a esta experta. Nosotros realizamos grupos focales con los jóvenes, principalmente con los jóvenes porque son los interesados, los que queríamos saber cuál era el impacto que estábamos tomando en ellos. Los hicimos en 2 grupos, dividimos primero género, mujeres y niñas, y después hicimos un consolidado con mixto, femenino y masculino. El otro grupo focal que también tomamos fueron madres adolescentes de las comunidades, que lo hicimos en el centro de salud para ver cuáles fueron las problemáticas, por qué salieron embarazadas a temprana edad, qué era lo que estaba sucediendo con ellas y ver la problemática que había ahí. Y el último fue los padres y madres de los jóvenes de empoderamiento juvenil, ver cómo a su hijo ha impactado el estar en este programa de salud comunitaria, donde se le dan charlas de prevención de embarazo, donde se les da bullying, donde se les da los métodos anticonceptivos y liderazgo para que ellos se empoderen y puedan tener una carrera o estudiar o ser alguien mejor en esta vida. Al principio estábamos un poco nerviosos con este proceso porque era primera vez, no sabíamos qué íbamos a encontrar en el camino, pero gracias a la ayuda de GFC que nos guiaron, estuvieron constantemente apoyándonos en todo el proceso, pudimos realizarlo. Ellos, GFC, pues fue uno de los que nos apoyó con lo que era la planeación, las estrategias que teníamos que utilizar y el presupuesto en general. Fue un gran proceso interesante porque ya tuvimos algunos descubrimientos que más adelante se los vamos a ir mencionando.
Amazing, thank you, Rosa. And yes, we'll have time in a little bit where we'll talk through some of the findings and some of the learnings from both these projects and the learning review overall. Jackie, can you tell us a little bit about how the development of the case study went for Asociación AMA? How did things go? Were there any surprises? And who was involved from the organization?
Claro que sí, pues déjenme contarles que mi estudio de caso lo llevé a cabo con una niña adolescente maya quechí. para conocer su participación en espacios de diálogo e incidencia política, las cuales ella se ha desarrollado en la asociación. Pues déjenme contarles que el estudio de caso lo hicimos por medio de audio y video para documentar y escuchar y ver el grado de empoderamiento de esta niña adolescente. Déjenme contarles que ella ingresó en el 2018 como voluntaria en la asociación. Ahora es técnico de proyectos porque vieron el empoderamiento, el alcance del que ella tuvo. Y pues déjenme contarles que el estudio de caso se llevó a cabo por medio de entrevistas de campo, los cuales nos dirigimos a núcleo familiar, al núcleo de la comunidad educativa. Acá podemos ver las imágenes, nos fuimos hasta donde estaba su familia, viajamos por horas para ir con los informantes, por medio de la comunidad educativa, ya que ellas ven ahí igual el desarrollo que ellas van teniendo, y también por medio de las amistades. También nos dirigimos a líderes y lideresas, en las que ella se desenvuelve en su participación en espacios de diálogo e incidencia política, en compañeras de labor, ¿verdad? Ya que sabemos que ellas están ahí desde el principio cuando ella ingresó en la asociación y hasta ahora. Entonces nos platican el desenvolvimiento que ella ha tenido, el liderazgo que ha adoptado por medio de los procesos de AMA. Pues los informantes los elegí de acuerdo con los grupos focales más cercanos en las que ella ha estado, ya que ahí es donde nosotros nos informamos y escuchamos todo lo que ellos ven en la niña adolescente, ¿verdad? Entonces, nuestra estrategia fue realizar entrevistas de campo, por lo que decidimos llegar hasta la localidad de nuestros informantes. Ella habitaba en la cumbre San Luis Petén, Guatemala, a 2 horas de acá. Entonces ella se vino hasta acá para desarrollarse, porque nos contaba que desde pequeña a ella le gustaba la participación, le gustaba el diálogo, pero era algo tímida. Entonces, conforme los programas de Asociación AMA, ella se fue desenvolviendo poco a poco y seguimos monitoreándola. Aún este año participó en una oratoria de Mayaquepchi, lo cual se llevó el primer lugar. Entonces ya vemos nosotros ahí el grado de empoderamiento y el liderazgo y la participación en la que ella ha optado. Y pues el proceso de estudio de caso fue una experiencia bastante bonita, como lo decía anteriormente nuestra compañera Rosa María. Fue algo que hicimos por primera vez, entonces fue algo así como que, ay, ¿y ahora? Y bueno, como nos dieron igual seguimiento todo el tiempo de parte de GFC, entonces pudimos lograr visibilizar el grado de empoderamiento de esta niña adolescente en audio y video. Pues una de las sorpresas que nos llevamos fue que una lideresa nos platicaba que miraba a esta niña adolescente como Rigoberta Menchú en un futuro. Pues para darle un poquito de contexto de quién es Rigoberta Menchú, pues déjenme contarles que Rigoberta Menchú es una líder indígena, activista guatemalteca, con el galardón del Premio Nobel de la Paz. Entonces, al escuchar esto y ver el video, quedó muy bonito el video, lo cual fue algo impresionante para todo el equipo de trabajo cuando yo se los enseñé, y todos así como que qué bonito que vean a una niña adolescente en un futuro de tal manera.
Great, thank you so much, Jackie. And now I have a question for both of you, Jackie and Rosa. How did GFC support you during your research projects? And was there anything that you would suggest we should change next time in future learning reviews? Jackie, if you don't mind, let's start with you.
Ok, muchísimas gracias. Pues GFC fue el principal impulsor, ya que nos otorgó los fondos para la realización y principalmente nos dieron el seguimiento continuo para la realización y algo muy importante que fue las herramientas, la inducción de cómo hacer un estudio de caso, ya que acá en la asociación aún no habíamos realizado un estudio de caso. Entonces esto nos ayudó a nosotros ahora a hacer más estudios de caso, no solo a una niña, sino a varias niñas, a ver el grado de empoderamiento en las que ellas alcanzan. Entonces, considero que fue una herramienta bastante efectiva la que nos brindaron. ¿Por qué? Porque nos van a ayudar a plantear un estudio de caso a cada niña. Y pues en la siguiente pregunta, la que decía algo que consideran importante, pues considero que los fondos, ya que como decía en la pregunta anterior, teníamos que viajar hacia los informantes, entonces los informantes estaban a horas de camino, por lo cual necesitábamos recursos y pues esto nos limitó igual llegar a más informantes y a captar más información.
Bueno, en la parte de nosotros igual, fue primera vez que hacíamos el proceso. Estábamos un poco nerviosos, como lo había dicho antes, porque no habíamos nunca hecho un proceso de este tipo. GFC igual fueron los que nos motivaron a realizarlo, nos ayudó mucho ya que encontramos los resultados que nos ayudaron a crecer, a mejorar, a seguir trabajando en pro de las niñas, niños y adolescentes. De igual forma, esto nos benefició ya que nos dio un aprendizaje, nos ayuda a mejorar, igual nos ayudó a conectarnos con otras organizaciones para ver qué tipo de estrategia podíamos utilizar con nuestras niñas, al igual hicimos una red con las otras organizaciones para colaboraciones y todo. También igual como dice Jackie, para mí, para mejorarse sería lo del presupuesto, de igual forma, ya que con el presupuesto se tenía que pagar a los expertos, moverse a los lugares, los materiales que se iban a utilizar y pues lo logramos hacer con el presupuesto que GFC nos dio, pero como sugerencia sería aumentar o monitorear más ese presupuesto. GFC sin duda estuvo todo el tiempo con nosotros, apoyándonos si teníamos alguna pregunta, habían sesiones de reuniones y aunque no fueran a las sesiones de reuniones y teníamos alguna duda, ellos estaban abiertos a que nosotros escribiéramos un correo y mandar a preguntar para estar con el proceso y estar a tiempo con lo que era la entrega de resultados.
Amazing. Thank you both. And we really appreciate the feedback and strengthening this process. Yeah, this is an ongoing process, and it's really important to make sure that we incorporate feedback in future rounds. So let's move on to talking about findings and lessons learned from this process. So this question is for both Dani and Lisa. What were some of the most noteworthy lessons that came out of the learning review? Lisa, if you don't mind, let's start with you.
Wonderful, thank you. As far as just touching on some specific findings of the learning review itself, as far as the impact of the initiative is concerned, through all of those different activities, we found that the initiative was overall meeting its objectives. Partners were using GFC's financial and non-financial support to build their organizational technical capacities and also to expand and strengthen their programs. Through the independent research projects, we learned of changes in the lives of adolescent girls that our partners worked with, such as significant increases in the girls' sense of empowerment, their solidarity, leadership skills, ability to take collective action, to stand up for themselves, and to plan their own futures, to dream about their own futures. Partners also reported that they really valued the variety of the different types of support provided throughout the initiative and the learning review. So we talked a little bit already about the various activities and the various types of support trainings, workshops that we offered during the learning review, but not to forget that during the entire course of the initiative, Danny and the Americas team offered so many different ways to build capacity, to connect, to just during COVID, literally to just be together in a virtual space to process the existential dread that everybody was living through in those couple of years. Now, if we reflect on the lessons learned about the process itself, I would like to say that one of the things is to build as many participatory processes from the start as possible. That was one of the lessons we really took away from this, and something that we already planned from the beginning to make it as collaborative and participatory as possible. But as I mentioned earlier, there were situations where we found even more opportunities to do that. In the future, I would like to make these learning reviews more accessible and participatory from the very start. So to build in these collaborations from the earlier design process stage. And honestly, not just from the design of the learning review, but from the very start of the initiative as much as possible, which we are doing more and more of at GFC with initiatives and partner cohorts that are starting with us. But on the other hand, really important to recognize that while we're making these activities participatory, accessible, collaborative, we really need to be aware, especially as funders, of time constraints that people have, and that for many, this type of involvement just adds an extra layer of work. So that, and I've seen a couple of questions come in through the Q&A section of the webinar that I'm hoping this response will answer. That component of balancing the time that it takes to be involved, because partners really wanted to be involved in this process. But some of our grassroots organizations, they only have a few people on their staff, so they can't dedicate a person for a whole few weeks away from their actual activities to be able to do research. So this is why we were trying with this particular initiative to offer a stipend for these independent research projects, which is also another lesson for us, is to make sure that that stipend is commensurate with the amount of time that it takes and the effort it takes to do these kind of studies. Overall, this collaborative approach also helped GFC explore the ways that the evaluation space can be more inclusive, and finding this balance that we talk about in the learning and evaluation space a lot, about conducting unbiased evaluations, but also making the design and review of the initiative participatory, empowering partners, and allowing for their voices to come through and to hear what is important to them. We were seeking to, yes, assess the impact of our work that it has, the work that it has on the grantees, but also the work that our grantee partners have on communities. And we wanted to do this without relying exclusively on traditional MEL methods. So we wanted to evaluate the effectiveness of the initiative, gather evidence of longer-term social change without burdening or disempowering grantees. And we also started this whole process. I remember the initial meeting that Danny, Kim, and I had, where we said that, we from the very beginning recognized that the partners themselves are the ones who are the experts in this process. So why don't we try to highlight and focus on that throughout the entire learning review as much as possible. And I think that shifting power back to the communities in this process and building trusting relationships with partners, in fact, leads to deeper, longer lasting social change. So that is why I'm continuously advocating for building learning and evaluation in from the start, getting getting input from partners on how they see this process, and deciding jointly what is most meaningful to measure and how we're going to measure it. And at the same time, looking for opportunities to build each other's capacities. The point was to incorporate feedback about the initiative and the relationship into the learning and evaluation practices, and also to recognize that evidence of change is really complex and multidimensional. So not saying that we absolutely got it right during this learning review. There are things that we would do differently, but those are some of the lessons that we took away and that we will be applying in all future opportunities such as this.
Thank you, Lisa. And Danny, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, Sam, thank you. I'm really glad that both Jackie and Rosa mentioned a little bit about the funding and how more funding would have allowed them to delve a little deeper into their research projects, would have made things easier. I completely agree. I think that due to budget limitations, we had to set a cap on partner grants for them to conduct their projects. But for me, this just reiterates the importance of practicing participatory budget planning with our partners. So as Lisa mentioned, participatory planning and making sure that we're involving our partners every step of the way. And that also involves budgeting, right? I think that, it's something that whenever possible, we try to do. And, it's one of the things that we as GFC are also trying to put into practice, is to just, be very mindful of what really partners need. Sometimes we make the mistake of thinking we know what partners need. Other times, it's just simply due to the sad reality of budget limitations. But I think at the end of the day, these processes just help us, focus inward, improve on these processes. And we're always very grateful that our trust-based relationships with our partners let them feel empowered to give us this sort of feedback so that we can continue improving. I think that also for GFC, it was very important to have this opportunity to involve partners in doing a deep dive into our own theory of change. As Lisa and I both mentioned previously, we had theory of change workshops where we invited partners to really take like a deep look into our theory of change and, sort of really test whether our model of flexible core funding, capacity development support, networking was really making a difference in partners and therefore translating to impact and a difference in the lives of the girls and boys and adolescents and youth that they serve. And yes, the results of the learning review revealed that flexible core funding, et cetera, capacity development, networking really do help partners improve their capacities and thus increase their impact. But through these participatory exercises, partners also had the opportunity to challenge some of the pre-established notions in our theory of change. So for instance, one very important point of feedback that we received during our theory of change, or after our theory of change workshops, is that partners insisted, yes, we focus on advancing girls' rights and opportunities, but many of these processes are ultimately the responsibility of the state. So, whatever the government of whatever country it is that they're operating in. And somehow the way that our theory of change was attributing this to partners, or sort of, it made them feel like they were through the language of our theory of change, we were somehow not acknowledging or leaving out that point of responsibility from government institutions. And I think that's a very, very valid and important piece of feedback, and it's something that as GFC is going through its own internal review and exploration of our theory of change is a point of feedback that we really want to take into account. And that was a direct result of having partners involved in this learning review process.
Thanks, Danny. And Jackie and Rosa, can you tell us a little bit about how the results of your research projects and case studies changed your approach to or your perspective on your organization's work?
La pregunta, pues déjenme contarles que uno de los primeros resultados que nos ayudaron a documentar el grado de empoderamiento que alcanza una niña adolescente en su participación en procesos de diálogo e incidencia política. Otro es que nos ayudaron a visibilizar el grado de influencia y la capacidad en la que apta una niña al pasar en los procesos que implementa AMA. Y como decía anteriormente, pues nos ayudaron en parte de la investigación, ya que ahora podemos realizar varios estudios de caso con todas las niñas. Algo que les quiero contar es que vemos el grado de empoderamiento que alcanzan las niñas. Por ejemplo, este año entró una niña como voluntaria a nuestro programa radial, el ABC de la sexualidad, que implementamos en AMA acá semanal. Entonces ahí vemos nosotros el desenvolvimiento que está teniendo esta niña adolescente al pasar por estos procesos que AMA impulsa. Y pues esto suma también a la ejecución del plan estratégico de Asociación AMA, donde uno de los objetivos a cumplir es el monitoreo y la evaluación, ¿verdad? Ya que ahí nos ayuda a nosotros a ver cómo está avanzando en sus capacidades las niñas y mujeres. Gracias.
Bueno, nosotros en los resultados que pudimos encontrar con este proceso de investigación, como les decía, trabajamos con el Centro de Salud para ver las estadísticas de las adolescentes embarazadas. Podemos observar que las estadísticas desde que nosotros iniciamos a dar las charlas en los colegios fueron bajando. El porcentaje de niñas embarazadas fue bajando. También podemos ver con los padres que desde el momento de que sus niños entraron al proyecto, al programa y estuvieron recibiendo las charlas de liderazgo, de empoderamiento, de desarrollo de habilidades, fueron creciendo también, son más abiertos, espontáneos, y pudimos ver también que a las niñas en especial se están empoderando. Anteriormente, si ellas llegaban a la universidad, lo que tenían que estudiar era lo que los padres decidían. Hoy en día, o carreras que tenían que ser estudiadas solo por mujeres. Hoy en día nosotros tenemos en la universidad estudiando 2 niñas arquitectas en arquitectura, y es un gran logro porque nunca, no habíamos tenido ninguna de ellas en todo este proceso, no lo habíamos tenido, solo se quedaban aquí cerca, Sabatino, o iban a otra comunidad cercana a estudiar por no salir del entorno de la familia. Hoy en día ellas están estudiando en la capital para ser unas arquitectas. Y por último, tuvimos que gracias a los resultados que nosotros obtuvimos, se creó una política de salvaguarda para las niñas y niños que nosotros estamos atendiendo. Esta política nos ha ayudado hoy en día a reaccionar en el momento de encontrar diferentes situaciones en las comunidades, como violencia, violaciones, enfermedades de transmisión sexual, lo que son abuso, todo. Nosotros tenemos un caso actualmente de una niña que está recibiendo violencia intrafamiliar, y con esta política de salvaguarda estamos poniendo en práctica todo lo que nosotros aprendimos en este proceso. Cómo reaccionar y cómo ayudar, no solo cómo descubrir los casos, sino cómo ayudar, cómo reaccionar en esto.
Great. Thank you so much, Rosa and Jackie. So we're reaching our Q&A section soon, but just to wrap us up, Lisa, would you mind answering one more question? If you had an opportunity to do a learning review again, what might you do differently? And what would you recommend we continue doing in future learning reviews?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Well, as I already mentioned, learning reviews like this one not only help us evaluate what we are learning together or the impact of the initiative, but also we see it as an opportunity to develop and nurture partner relationships, even during this final stage of the relationship, perhaps. And often, I think in traditional international development spaces, the midline evaluation or the end line evaluation does not envision a strong relationship building component. In fact, if we think about it, usually an outsider, a consultant might be a wonderful consultant, but somebody from the outside comes in, right? who is in the eyes of many local stakeholders, who is the auditor of sorts, evaluating the benefits and the maybe not the successes sometimes of the initiatives. But for us, we wanted to turn that, and we wanted to make sure that this part of our collaboration with partners was also a relationship building piece. And there's a lot of GFC staff and partners will tell you we really do value that relationship piece probably the most in our work with partners. So this was really important to us. And in any learning review, in any activity we really try to build that in at all of the different stages of the process. And it helps us, having this perspective helps us shift away from traditionally extractive learning and evaluation approaches that on one hand can pressure grantees to focus more on perhaps more easily measurable outcomes or results, but at the expense of looking at how their work really targets long-term social change. And so the process also instilled in us the desire to continue making the design and review of such initiatives more participatory, more inclusive. And if we could do this again, I would encourage our team to think about how we can be more strategic in planning various learning review activities, designing research questions. Though this was not our first experience with a participatory learning review, it was by far the most involved and the most sort of heavy endeavor, because it took quite a long time. We had a lot of different activities. We were also really excited to try all of these new approaches. And there were several times during the planning phase where we got together and someone said, oh, let's do this type of workshop. And I said, guys, we already have 10 other things we're doing. We need to really think about this more strategically. So next time, I think we would really question how we are designing research questions to avoid too much overlap in a lot of our activities and the data we collect, because this creates a lot of work for everyone at the end of the day to process all of this, to understand the different the different nuggets of information that are coming through in all of those activities. I saw, Sam, I'm going to respond to one of the questions I saw in the Q&A because it's related to your question here. The question was on the 3 biggest challenges in conducting this learning review, the way that we have detailed. I would say that I'll just summarize some of what was already mentioned. Finding sufficient funding to reimburse partners, the budget side of things, really important for conducting independent research and for involving people at this level. Secondly, something we haven't really talked a lot about today, but this is an ever-present need, is finding the balance between satisfying donor requirements that we have for our donor and involving partners in a way that would not be burdensome and that would actually be useful for them. So that was a big challenge, and it took a lot of thinking together of how we were going to accomplish this, and honestly convincing the donor that this was the way that we were going to do things and that this was important, and here is why. This is why it's relevant. That can be quite a challenge sometimes, depending on donors that you work with. We were lucky that our proposals were all accepted, and it did take some convincing, but it was in the end a very positive outcome. And thirdly, one of the challenges is time, of course. Finding time to do this in a way that is meaningful for us, for our partners, and that we actually learn. That means designating quite a large amount of time to doing this, to doing a learning review this way. And I'm talking about the time of our team, the time of the consultants, the time of the partners. That can be, as you know, for people who know a little bit about monitoring, learning, and evaluation, that can be really a challenge because you often don't have, 6 months to carry out your activities. You have just several weeks and you need to get a move on. But We really prioritized this for quite a long time. And I think in the future, if we were to do this, I would like for us to really build in the time to work with partners collaboratively on a learning review.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so we've reached the end of our prepared presentation and conversation, and I would like to start the Q&A section. I see that we've gotten a couple more people since 12 o'clock, so I just wanted to say there is an interpretation function at the bottom of the Zoom page on your screen that you can click on, and you should be able to select between an English and Spanish channel. For those just joining us, we have interpretation. And I also wanted to say that with the time change in the United States, I think the Zoom registration link we sent out, Zoom didn't completely update the time difference. So apologies for those of you who are just joining if that was confusing. But thank you for all joining us, and thank you so much to the people who put questions into the Q&A function. So I wanted to start by asking a question. Let's see. Yeah, this one is, I think, either Rosa or Jackie. This one will be for you. Laura Houston asked, how were the children/adolescents empowered, if at all, in your research to communicate their experiences, priorities, and wishes? Do you consider allowing girls, boys to participate in evaluating?
Bueno, nosotros hicimos lo que son grupos focales con ellos, los llevamos a un lugar distinto, fuera del entorno que siempre ellos están. Les realizamos una lista de cuestionarios donde ellos pudieran expresar de forma abierta, sin ninguna persona adulta, sin ninguna persona que estuviera guiándolos para responder lo que ellos necesitaban. Entonces tuvimos eso, también hicimos lo que son grupos sobre dibujos para ver cuáles eran sus sueños, cuáles eran lo que ellos querían, y también lo constatamos con lo que algunos de ellos ya están, desde el inicio que estaban con nosotros, lo que han logrado en estos últimos años. Como les decía anteriormente, las niñas que están en estas comunidades por lo general no estudiaban, terminaban los estudios de secundaria y se quedaban en sus casas a tener maridos, que era la costumbre, a tener hijos. Hoy en día estas niñas están yendo a las universidades a estudiar carreras que anteriormente solo le correspondían a hombres. Por ejemplo, arquitectura, solo eran estudiadas por hombres. Hoy en día nosotros tenemos 2 niñas que están estudiando arquitectura en esta carrera en segundo y tercer año de la universidad.
En mi caso, como lo decía anteriormente, lo realicé con una niña adolescente. Me dirigí hacia diferentes núcleos, lo cual era el núcleo familiar, en las amistades, en líderes y lideresas, donde ella se ha...
Jackie,
you're on
perdón,
mute.
sí, estás en mute.
Ay, lo siento. Bueno, les repito, pues como les platicaba anteriormente, mi estudio de caso lo llevé a cabo con una niña adolescente, Maya Kepchi, lo cual el estudio de caso lo realicé por medio de entrevistas de campo para captar bien el grado de empoderamiento que esta niña adolescente ha alcanzado, lo cual lo realicé por medio de audio y video para que nos quedara igual ahí y escuchar y ver lo que dicen las personas más cercanas de ella. La mamá nos cuenta que dice que desde pequeña a ella le gustaba los espacios, el diálogo, pero sin embargo ella era algo tímida. Entonces en el transcurso de traspaso de capacidades en el 2018, donde ella entró como voluntaria en la asociación, entonces ahí ella fue desarrollándose poco a poco, empoderándose, tomando un liderazgo excelente, como platicaba anteriormente, ha capacitado, ha participado en oratorias y sin embargo se ha llevado el primer lugar. Entonces esto ha sido algo satisfactorio para AMA porque sabemos que estamos haciendo un buen trabajo. Gracias.
Great, thank you for sharing about that. We also have a question from Chris Stein that's directed at Lisa, but I think Dani could also speak to this. What learning can you share with others looking to implement a similar process? So any top level takeaways or advice you have?
Thanks, Sam. I can just reiterate a couple of points. I think we already talked a lot about this, but basically I would say that building in this collaborative approach from the very start is really important. And as I mentioned, not just from the start of the evaluation, but also from the start of the project. So at GFC, we really try to work with partners from the very beginning on understanding how they approach their work, how they view the work that they're doing as meaningful in their communities, how they engage their communities and the children in their work themselves. And as Dani mentioned, sometimes funders, we can think that, we know what's best and we know what these community organizations are going to need. And that has been the story that, international development spaces have told for generations. But we're starting to see that shift. And it is really exciting to be part of that time where these kinds of approaches are shifting and becoming more partner-centered, more community-centered, more centered on young people that are, exercising their voice and their rights as part of their communities. So my big takeaway for this and for designing future learning reviews and initiatives is to get the partner voices in there as early as possible. For a cross-regional initiative that we're working on right now in 3 different regions with 66 different partners with partners who are working with children through education, different approaches in education, mostly on play-based learning. Our staff is out there visiting these partners as early as possible, building relationships, understanding how they approach their work, how they work with children, what they value, and really trying to get at the essence of what these organizations are about. We did a survey recently of all of these organizations to understand a little bit more, what their stories are and where they come from and where the approaches that they use originated and why they use those specific approaches to work with children, to see how they also bring the youth voices into decision making. So I know that there was a question about considering allowing girls and boys to evaluate, and I think we're seeing that especially youth-led organizations are better positioned to do this because they're closer, they are still representative of the essence of children and youth in those communities. So they're really excited to bring that power back to their communities. But we're seeing this across the board with a lot of our grassroots partners, and I think just giving them power to feel that they can really highlight those voices and those experiences and share their own knowledge and experience with other partners and with us. I think that's the main thing that we can do. And as I mentioned, sometimes that requires us, GFC, to do more work to be able to influence the donors and to influence the state, to let others know that this is the only way we see of working. This is the right way that we really value. And that is another side. Maybe we will have a different webinar on that. to talk about how that influencing work happens on behalf of our partners.
And I would just add to what Lisa was saying that I think this experience for us just really reiterated the importance of placing value on qualitative learning processes. Because, you know, at the end of the day, our partners are working with girls, with boys, with adolescents, with youth. And sometimes the change that partners are seeking to achieve in the communities in which they work in, you know, it can be measured with certain quantitative indicators, but the qualitative aspect of it is just as important, because you know, these are the processes that allow us to tell the real stories of change from the perspective of partners. So I think that was a really big takeaway for us as part of the learning review process.
Great, thanks, Dana. I'm just going to look through a couple questions really fast. Yeah, and Jackie and Rosa, you spoke to this a little bit already, but I think people were wanting to hear a little bit more about if you changed anything in your practice following this research, and did anything emerge from the evidence that convinced you to change what you do or how you work?
Pues en mi caso, lo que cambiaba eran los horarios de mis informantes, ya que nos adaptamos a sus horarios, llegábamos hasta sus localidades, pero sin embargo todo salió de la mejor manera, los entrevistamos y estuvimos ahí con ellos. Empezamos con la misma niña adolescente y terminamos con la misma niña adolescente y seguimos monitoreándola.
De igual forma, nosotros tuvimos que adaptarnos a los horarios de los expertos porque no eran de la zona. Igual teníamos que adaptarnos a los horarios de los expertos, al horario de los padres, porque algunos no coincidían, unos estaban trabajando, otros no, y necesitábamos tenerlos todos juntos. Otra de las cosas que cambiamos fue dónde hicimos con los muchachos, con los jóvenes. No lo hicimos en el edificio donde ellos llegan todos los días constantemente, sino para cambiar el ambiente, que ellos se sintieran un poquito más cómodos, más tranquilos, relajados. Los llevamos a un lugar cerca de la playa, lo cambiamos el espacio para que ellos se sintieran un poquito más cómodos.
Great, thank you. And another question for Rosa and Jacqueline. Do you face any social and cultural limitations that affect how adolescents or the views of adolescents and their participation in activities like the research that you just conducted? Sorry, I can say that again. I think I stumbled over it. Did you understand the question? Okay.
No, sí se entendió, porque creo que sí, sobre las limitantes que hemos tenido con las niñas. Bueno, nosotros hemos tenido lo que en la zona rural está muy involucrado lo que es la cultura machista. Entonces, algunas niñas están en eso de que muchos padres no las dejan lo que es ser como un poquito más independiente, ser más espontánea. También está involucrado en lo que es la cultura de la religión. Nos costó un poco entrar con lo que son los temas de sexualidades, igual de forma a los padres. Algunos no querían que las niñas hablaran sobre sexualidad porque era como que nosotros las estábamos induciendo a tener relaciones sexuales. Entonces fue algo un poquito complicado los temas de sexualidades para nosotros poderlo involucrar en los colegios y con las niñas que son de religiones, algunas religiones.
Pues de mi parte, algunas complicaciones fueron las idas y venidas, pues los idiomas, ya que donde ella es originaria, entonces hablan el idioma maya quechí, entonces tuvimos un poquito de complicaciones, pero sin embargo todo salió muy bien. Y hay algo también que la desigualdad, hay veces que hay demasiada desigualdad, entonces costó un poquito tratar eso, pero sin embargo todo salió de la mejor manera según la gente.
Amazing, thank you. Let's see. I'm just looking through the list of questions. Thank you all again for putting questions in the chat or in the Q&A area. There was a question for Jackie specifically about kind of your journey in getting to where you are in your organization, Asociación AMA, and yeah, your journey to getting to this type of work that you're working in.
Bueno, les voy a contar un poco sobre mi historia, cómo entré como voluntaria en AMA. Para empezar, pues déjenme contarles que entré en el 2018 con la niña adolescente con la que estudié el caso. Yo también era una persona bastante tímida, porque cuando hablo hay veces que se me traba mucho la lengua, entonces era de que bastante reservada. Pero, sin embargo, en estos espacios y en los programas en los que AMA realiza, entonces me fui desenvolviendo poco a poco, y yo nunca me miraba y me visualizaba en un programa de radio porque le tenía pánico eso de hablar en público, y hoy me miro aquí en este webinario y digo, wow, cómo es que he cambiado, porque en años atrás no platicaba con nadie. Entonces considero que AMA hace un buen trabajo, porque miren, acá estoy y antes no me gustaba hablar ni nada. Entonces, al igual a esta niña adolescente la impulsaron a desarrollarse porque tiene un talento excelente. Y pues quiero contar también que AMA inició con un grupo de mujeres en el año 2012 y ahora es una organización que trabaja con niñas adolescentes y mujeres jóvenes de todo el sur de Petén.
Thank you for sharing about that, Jackie. Rosa, could you tell us a little bit about your journey to getting to where you are?
Bueno, yo inicié con una organización llamada Casa Verde, anteriormente como asistente, e inicié como madre soltera a los 19 años. Tuve mi bebé y era una mamá soltera, no había terminado la universidad, y decidí dejar la universidad y comenzar a trabajar para salir adelante. Después de eso hubo un pequeño problema con los donantes de esa organización, y crea lo que se unificó con Casa Verde, y comencé igual, estaba como asistente. Siempre CREA me dio la oportunidad de terminar lo que era la universidad, y hoy en día estoy como facilitadora de un programa, y también hoy en día estoy estudiando otra carrera para seguir adelante, para seguir empoderándome. Es una de las cosas que he aprendido en todo este proceso, de que no podemos quedarnos con una sola cosa, no podemos estar en el mismo lugar, sino que tenemos que seguir adelante. Y ser mujer no te limita a seguir adelante, a tener nuevas cosas. Tenemos las mismas capacidades. No quiere decir que una mujer es más que un hombre, ni que un hombre es más que una mujer. Todos estamos en el mismo nivel y tenemos las mismas capacidades, y me ha enseñado a que debemos de luchar por lo que nosotros queremos y empoderar.
Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, I think we're reaching the end of our time. I just wanted to close out with one last question. Jackie and Rosa, is there one message or lesson learned that you would each like to share with the audience today before we close out?
Pues mi mensaje para todas y todas que nos están escuchando es que nos empoderemos, que cuidemos nuestro mundo, que tengamos un mundo libre de violencia, que haya igualdad de género, que como mujeres nos apoyemos a seguir adelante, que sigamos apoyando a estas organizaciones que hacen un trabajo excelente para niños y niñas. Entonces, y que también que nos informemos y que traslademos la información para que todas y todas estemos informadas.
De igual forma, como Jacqueline dice o nos está mostrando, que nosotros hagamos un trabajo con los niños, niñas y adolescentes, trabajemos en pro de ellos, que están en todo el mundo. Sabemos que hay organizaciones que están trabajando para ayudar a estas niñas, a los niños, a los adolescentes y a las mujeres también, trabajar por la igualdad de género, por todas estas capacidades que hoy en día se trabajan en conjunto. Es un problema global que todos, si nos unimos, podemos llevarlo, irlo solucionando poco a poco.
Thank you both for closing us out with those inspiring messages. And thank you all for joining us today. I would like to give a particular thanks to our panelists, Jackie, Rosa, Danny, and Lisa, and also to our amazing interpreter, Maria Chimino, who has done a really good job and worked very hard on this call. That is just constant translation. I'd also like to thank Maria Victoria, who's behind the scenes setting up the webinar and managing the chat and helping us get questions at the end there. So I know we weren't able to get to everyone's questions. We'll look through the chat and we'll send out an email later this week that has both a recording of this webinar on it and also, if there were any more questions, some of our panelists' written responses to those. So yeah, thank you so much again for joining us. I hope you have a great day and that you come away with some new ideas about how to do learning evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for joining, and thank you, Sam, for facilitating this discussion.
Thank you, everyone.